We are in the Transporter Cafes, we're always looking for borders and for options how to cross borders. We are all surrounded by borders. Most of you crossed the border from Nickel to Kirkenes. I heard it took 1.5 hours because too many people at the same time on the same border. But usually you can make it in 7 to 12 minutes if you have your papers prepared. And the same as we are always dealing with mental borders, physical borders, language borders, geographical borders, national borders, professional borders, or even time zone borders. Therefore, I don't want to talk too much because when this Transporter Cafe is finished, Russia is already tomorrow. So our participants from Russia, they might be very tired. So it's my pleasure to give the word to Emma. Welcome on stage.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to thank our panelists who are, I think here, probably munching on pizza back there, for coming all this way. Some of them traveled for a long time to get here tonight. I'd also like to thank the CBC team for inviting me to chair this event. Truth be told, I wasn't sure exactly why they asked me, compared to people in this room who live and work across multiple borders every day. I know relatively little about them. But after talking to some colleagues of mine, I realized it's because I was the only person in town who was new enough to believe Atla when he said, this is a really, small, intimate gathering. Not a big deal at all. People just drink beer. It's very relaxed. Thank you, Atla. But the invitation did get me thinking about my own cross-border experience. I travel for work. I am a journalist. And, in that travel, there are obvious cross-border experiences. But do I have comparable ones at home? I'm from Canada. And, we share only 2 borders with the same neighbor. And, it's a bit isolated in that sense. But within Canada, we have people from all over the world, immigrants from, dozens of countries, and they come and they bring their own traditions and cultures. So my cross-border experience at home involves no passports, no work permits. I don't even have to go through passport control. I just have to walk across the street and suddenly I'm in a new neighborhood like Korea, or Little Korea, Chinatown, or the Greek village. I don't speak the language the street signs are written in, and I don't wear the same clothes, and I really don't know a ton about the people who live there and about their lives, but I still have to work there and connect with them in order to do my job. So on a micro and macro scale, journalists work across borders every day, social, cultural, political, economic, whether we know it or not. So the theme for this evening is, how can cross-border cooperation and communication help journalists with what they do? So with that, I'd like to actually introduce our panelists, if they want to head up here now, and they can say a few words about themselves, and we can get started.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. It's my first time in Norway. And my name is Andrej Matišák. I'm from Slovakia. I'm deputy head of foreign desk of daily paper Pravda, which Pravda means truth. So I represent the truth here. So this is my catchphrase. And Pravda also means truth in Russian language, by the way. So sometimes people think that I'm from Russia, not from Slovakia, and sometimes I'm not complaining because then when people think I'm from Russia, they think I'm more important because who knows Slovakia, right? So that's fine, super, thank you. So I'm glad I'm here. I hope it will be a great night or great evening, and we have a great audience. I met a couple of you in Nickel, and so looking forward to the discussion.
Hello, my name is Anastasia Yakunuk. I'm from Russia, from Murmansk, and I work for the news agency RIA Novosti. We are good neighbors with Norway, that's why I cross the border quite often. And I work here, I have good friends here. I travel here as a tourist, and several years ago I felt myself so stupid in the company of Norwegian friends that because I couldn't understand them, and I started to learn Norwegian, and that is another reason why I like to come to Norway to speak Norwegian and feel myself quite clever. And I write quite a lot about Norway, about positive things, sometimes about negative, but I like this way of learning this country.
Thank you, Anastasia. I'm Norwegian. I'm also like Anastasia. I love my neighboring country. I travel frequently to Russia. I really like to write about that and report about that, and especially the cooperation across our borders. We are part of the statistics, me and Anastasia, that shows that the border crossing point here that many of you crossed today, the number of border crossings are going very rapidly upwards. My name is Thomas Nielsen. I'm editor of the only English-Russian language publication in this European part of the Arctic. It's named BarentsObserver.com. We cover mainly the Barents region. That is not only northern Norway and northwest Russia, but it's also partly from northern part of Finland and northern part of Sweden. But our main part is what's going on up here. And trust me, everyone, there are more than enough good stories to report about from this region. So it's really cool to be here. Thank you.
I'm from Bulgaria. I work for the largest daily newspaper in Bulgaria, and my heart is in entirely cross-border investigative reporting. I'm doing this for many years, and I'm almost local because I was here in Kirkenes in February, and I started noticing that I very much like some models which we eventually can implement in Bulgaria, but I don't focus.
Добрый вечер, меня зовут Татьяна Лебедева, я буду говорить на русском.
Good evening, my name is Tatiana Lebedeva and I will speak Russian.
Я медиаэксперт из Украины.
I'm a media expert from Ukraine.
У Украины много соседей.
Ukraine has a lot of neighbors.
Со многими, с большинством из них у нас прекрасные отношения.
And we have excellent relations with the majority of them.
На территории Украины создано достаточно много еврорегионов.
There are quite a few Euro regions established in Ukraine.
И последнее время я прикладываю усилия для того, чтобы помочь медиа в этих областях стать таким мостом коммуникации между соседними народами, исключить язык вражды и помочь наладить постоянный и доверительный диалог и полилог между соседними странами.
So recently I have been making a lot of effort in helping this media in these regions to serve as communication bridges with the neighboring regions across the border to establish cooperative dialogue and polyglot with them.
Great, thank you. So our program for this evening is loosely that we'll have a chat right now, probably 45 minutes to an hour about cross-border issues. Then we will be watching a video, have a brief intermission, and then we're going to speak with the videographer for the film, who is actually all the way from Gaza. So we'll chat for a few minutes, and then the panelists will come back and wrap up the evening, and we'll finish off with some music. And then before we jump into this, the audience should know that we have a hashtag on Twitter right now. It's CBC Forum. So throughout this, if you have any questions or comments, post them with that hashtag, and My fantastic colleague Jimmy is going to be over there going through them, and we'll pick out a couple for the panelists to answer at the end of the night. So feel free to specify if you want a particular person to answer your question. And with that in mind, everyone in this room is aware of the impact social media and the internet have had on the way we communicate and we share information. And this is where we're going to begin tonight's discussion. Twitter is arguably now the #1 source for information worldwide. So with this level of access, in what way do borders still exist or not in journalism? Do they exist? Yeah.
Which is waving to somebody, but thank you. They exist and they don't. As you mentioned, Emma, Twitter is something quite unique too. I think it's something that would help you very much in your work. And of course, what sometimes is pretty annoying because it's just popping out and popping out and popping out. With borders, it's there are in virtual world there are no borders, but of course it was mentioned that there are some borders in our minds sometimes. So yes, also we have to use social media as a journalist quite responsibly, not jumping to every stupid things what is popping out on my Twitter feed, and there are a lot of them. Checking sources. So with social media, the world is easier, but of course a bit harder sometimes because everybody thinks that we have to work 24/7 because 24/7 media cycles is here, and as I said, every time something is popping out from my Twitter feed, and sometimes I also in the this temptation. Okay, this it sounds great. It looks great. I'm going to follow it. Okay, maybe not, because I have to follow this and that. So it's not easy, and then you have those kind of borders, mental borders, that what you have to do, what you have to do, whom to follow, what to follow, and this is something. What, as I said, it's make our life easier, but also harder to separate what is important, what is not important. So at the end, maybe the virtual world is very much as our real life, to separate what is important and what is not important, to check sources, to check what is right, what is wrong, to check what matters, what doesn't matter. So it's something what helps you, but of course not all the time.
I can say that I'm probably too young to compare what was earlier with the borders and now, but I think that now it's much easier. For me, it's not a problem to come to Norway and to work here, and I'm always welcome here. And I can hardly remember some situation when I was working as a journalist and had problems with communication here and so on. But I know that for my Norwegian colleagues, for example, it's much more difficult to come to Russia and to work as journalists. They have to be accredited, and they need a special visa, type of a visa, so it's more difficult for them. And that is a question we are discussing a lot during our meetings, but we can push this situation forward. We just take it as it. We have to take it as it is. We can't change it. So, but I mentioned that we are very good neighbors, and we are so good neighbors and friends and nearly relatives, I would say, because we are united with a common historical basis, and that is a very important heritage for us, and we feel in the same way, I think, and we understand that the same things in this way. And we come to each other not to write our reports, but Norwegians come to Murmansk region to buy fuel, and we come here to buy pampers for our babies. And that's it. But there is one border I would like to mention for Russian journalists, for example, that is a language, because there are not so many journalists, even among young journalists, who can speak fluent any language, foreign language. And I don't know why. Probably they think that we are a huge country and we all speak Russian, and there is a very small Norway or some other land somewhere there, and we don't need to learn languages. But that is a problem. I was and I am a member of a journalists network here in the Barents region, and it's very important for us. The name is Barents Press, the network that unites journalists in the Barents region. And when we organized seminars and conferences for young journalists, there was a problem to find a specialist with the language. So still now that is a border for us, I would say.
There is definitely a border. Let me move back in time. When I was a bit younger, a few years ago, this was the winter of 1990-1991. I worked at a local radio station located up in the valley, some 40 kilometers south of Kirkenes here. We were the very first media in Scandinavia to establish a link over to our colleagues on the other side of the Iron Curtain, that it was named those days, that was the Soviet Union, and we managed to make a radio link via a very, very bad telephone line to Murmansk. So we broadcasted once a week a radio show together with Radio Murmansk and this Radio Pacific, as it was called here. That was really breaking or opening the border. I don't remember very much of what we were broadcasting. It was probably mainly some few talks and some music and so on. But wow, we had a great celebration that day when we managed to have this bad phone line over both ways. These were thousands and thousands of locals in Murmansk listening to this radios. And then there was some few tens listening to our local radio in the Pacific Valley. But then, some of you might remember the shooting at the TV tower in Vilnius that winter. And then we decided, wow, we have this cool way of broadcasting into Murmansk, so we started translating BBC World Service. We were listening on one ear, and we had a translator in studio and presenting the news into the Soviet Union, because those news were not broadcasted by Radio Murmansk those days. And I think we managed to be live for approximately 2.5 hours, and then suddenly they scrambled with this voice scrambler for our radios, and we were blocked for 48 hours. I think that is probably one of the very last times they used the scrambler to block FM signals from Western Europe. So that was the opening of the border, and we also saw how it worked when we were broadcasting something that was not very much liked on the other side of the border. I think I agree very much with Anastasia that the language is our biggest barrier today. You said that there are not that many Russian journalists speaking Norwegian and so on, but I can assure you there are way fewer local journalists in northern part of Norway speaking Russian. There is a few, and they are doing a tremendously good job. But language barrier is probably number one as a border today. It's much easier to travel. You travel to Murmansk in 3.5 hours, so the travel itself is not that complicated, but the language. Border number two is, of course, the culture understanding. Wow, we are doing, how many mistakes aren't we doing because we simply don't understand the culture on the other side. They're living some few kilometers. It's not very far away over to Nikko, but it's a totally another world when it comes to common understandings and so on. You mentioned the sources, what to believe in social media, Twitter, and so on. But yes, there is a huge difference on how to trust the source in Murmansk, or here in Kirkenes, in Moscow, or in Oslo, or probably also across the other borders. So borders definitely exist as much today as it did during the Cold War in the Soviet period, but the border appears in another way for us as reporters today.
It exists, and I'll tell you why. For many years, for 10 years, I belonged to an international network of investigative journalists. I'm a member of the network of investigative journalism in Washington, D.C. And also I belong to several networks which exchange emails in every single minute. If I need some information from, across oceans, not borders, but oceans, I can get it within a minute. And I'll give you an example. Recently, I trying to gather materials for a huge investigation related to a Bulgarian crook who stayed in the U.S. prisons for 4 years because he cheated American investors. Anyway, so only within minutes I post in our network, does somebody have contacts in this and this and this and this registers and in this and this and this countries? And I got emails from 5 or 6 reporters explaining, okay, what help you need. And I immediately sent them my questions about the properties, about information about what kind of properties my guy owns here and there, what kind of court records we have for him. And within several days, I got everything from my colleagues, even from countries which I didn't expect to get information from. So I really believe that even when we make a local journalism, because obviously this guy was only in the local Bulgarian interest, even making local journalism, we make it using global tools, So I strongly recommend and suggest to all colleagues here in this hall, which are journalists, to join this powerful networks and to exchange information. Because sometimes, for instance, if you need access to, let's say, court records in the United States or whenever, and they're very expensive, you cannot pay. Our editorial office is not so rich. But within minutes, you can reach a colleague, colleagues all over the world, asking, okay, do you have access to company registers, or do you have access to trade registers, or do you have access to court records? And you immediately, just with one click, you get such a, powerful, large information, and you can publish tens of investigations. So I really believe that the borders are very easily to overcome thanks to cooperation between colleagues in our networks.
Мы говорим сегодня о границах, барьерах языковых, о барьерах исторических. Да, барьеров много.
Today we're talking about borders, we're talking about barriers, language barriers, historic barriers, and there are many of those.
Но если присмотреться к жизни в регионах, то на самом деле, да, есть отличия, но общего больше.
And if we take a closer look at the life in the regions, of course there are differences, but there are a lot more things that are in common.
Потому что все мы знаем, во всяком случае медийщики прекрасно знают, что людей беспокоят очень простые вещи.
Because we, at least media people, know very well what kind of simple things concern simple people.
Как жить,
how to live,
как все-таки сохранять природу,
how to protect nature,
как выстоять в условиях экономического, энергетического и прочих кризисов. Но я не буду перечислять, то есть мы понимаем, что речь идет, вообще говоря, о простых вещах и, в общем-то, одинаковых, идентичных для жителей географического региона.
How to survive in an economic or energy crisis, and I won't go into detail, but we're talking about very simple things that are common for the people within a specific geographic region.
И задача тех, кто работает в регионе, и тех, кто реализует какие-то интересные проекты, и тех, кто пишет об этих проектах, просто сосредоточиться на том общем, что есть и что должно быть, и расширить круг людей, которые об этом знают и думают.
So, and the objective of the people who are working in the region, who are implementing interesting projects and who are writing about them, is to focus on these things that are in common and to expand the number of people who are doing this.
Сейчас, в эпоху новых медиа и мультимедийных платформ, вообще говоря, преодолеть даже языковые различия не представляется проблемой. На самом деле мы знаем примеры таких интересных порталов. Кстати, вот «Медиасфера» — это проект Баренцевого секретариата. Я вот, когда меня пригласили, познакомилась. Это очень интересный проект. И действительно думаю, что язык не помеха для его реализации.
So in this modern era of new technology and multimedia, I don't think language is a major problem. It can be overcome. And for example, the Barents Mediasphere project that is run by the Barents Secretariat is very interesting. I think that the language can be overcome as a barrier.
Я думаю, что основной проблемой для постсоветских стран, для постсоветского пространства является не язык и не что-то, а прежде всего то наследство тяжелое, которое нам осталось от советских медиа, то есть привычка к односторонней коммуникации, без обратной связи и к такой достаточно частой формализации всего, о чем пишут.
So I think the major problem for the media in the former Soviet countries is have a legacy that we inherited, that is one-way communication without feedback and the tendency to formalize things very much.
Поэтому я думаю, что главной и первой задачей тех, кто работает в регионе, это понять, что необходимо выстроить такую дорогу с двусторонним движением.
So I think the first and foremost task of people working in the region is to understand that they need to build a two-way road.
С одной стороны, те, кто чего-то хотят сделать в регионе, реализовать какие-то проекты, должны понять, что пока о них не заговорят медиаперсоны, их не будет.
So on the one hand, people who want to implement projects in the regions must understand that they will not be known until media persons speak about them.
То есть то, чего нет в медиа, просто не существует, мы это знаем.
And we know that things are not in the media, do not exist.
И поэтому нужно вопросам медиакомпоненту, вопросам освещения, вопросам распространения информации о ваших проектах уделять гораздо больше внимания.
And therefore you need to pay a lot more attention to the media component, to the distributing your information over media.
И придумывать какие-то инновационные, интересные методы, как количественно и качественно улучшить информационное сопровождение ваших проектов.
And you must think about the new innovative methods of how to improve the information, dissemination of information about your project, both in terms of quality and quantity.
С другой стороны, журналистам нужно понять, что у них есть уникальный шанс перестать наконец-то печатать эти чудовищные пресс-релизы.
So on the other hand, the journalists have a possibility to finally understand that they can stop publishing those terrible press releases.
Основным содержанием мы знаем. Прошла конференция, выступил руководитель, приехал почетный гость, завершился проект.
And we know what these press releases are like. There was a conference, this or that had spoke, and there was this dignitary visiting, and this was the result.
Уверяю вас, что ни душе, ни сердцу, ни диалогу такие материалы, такие новости не способствуют.
And I can assure you that this kind of news doesn't facilitate any dialogue or doesn't appeal to your heart or to your mind.
И журналистам ответственным, социально ответственным, профессиональным журналистам одна из миссий которых быть переводчиком со сложного языка политиков, технологов на простой, понятный людям язык.
So, and the mission of the socially responsible journalist is to be the interpreters of the difficult or complicated language of the politicians, of the technologists, to the language that can be understood by ordinary people.
Нужно приложить немножко фантазии, может быть, немножко подучиться, может быть, перенять опыт коллег из соседних стран и придумывать новые интересные формы.
So and there you just need to apply maybe some fantasy, and maybe you need to learn something, maybe from your colleagues from the neighboring countries, and you need to think up of new ways of presenting this.
И прежде всего любую информацию преломлять через судьбу человека.
And first and foremost, present information through the eyes or through the destiny of a person.
Реализуется проект в регионе, вот строится мост.
So if there is a project in the region, for example, a bridge is being built.
Нужно только рассказать о том, как изменится судьба конкретно людей, вот живущих в этом регионе.
All you need to speak about is how the lives of the people living in the region will change as a result.
Как конкретно это отразится на конкретном жителе.
What kind of impact, specific impact it will have on a specific person, local person.
Я говорю, в общем-то, такие азбучные истины, повторяю, но, знаете, по моему опыту вот, проведения семинаров с журналистами в регионах, это не всегда понимается.
So I'm speaking these proverbial truths, but from my experience from holding seminars in the regions, I can see that the journalists do not always understand that.
Вот поэтому основной вывод, который мы сделали, что медиакомпонент, медиасоставляющая должны быть непременно составляющими любых трансграничных проектов.
And therefore, we made this conclusion that the media component must be an essential part of any cross-border project.
Does anybody want to respond to anybody's comments, or should we go? No? Okay. Do you want to take your mic back? There you go. Okay, well, I wanted to circle back to something Andre said, which is borders in our minds. The Sami people in the Finnmark region don't actually believe in borders. They don't recognize them. Their culture spans, Russia, Sweden, Finland, and Norway, and they've lived like that for over 1,000 years. Has our I don't want to say westernized because that's kind of a cliche, but it is westernized, mindset and our loyalty to the idea of borders and separation helped or hurt cross-border relations? Should intersections like this town just be a melting pot for all the different cultures in this area, or should we protect the separate identities and try to bridge gaps over them? Thomas, why don't you start us off?
I think it's very important, especially these days when there is a kind of global colder climate between east and west. I think it's of utmost importance that we have a kind of gatherings where for journalists to meet even more and to learn even more out of each other's cultures and each other's way of reporting about authorities, about the state, about NGOs, how the society actually works. So that's even more important nowadays than earlier, and that's also has been one of the main legs in the Barents cooperation over these 22 years of the four countries cooperation up here in the northern part of Europe to make it possible or to assist, make support programs for journalists to follow projects. When there are a group of people traveling from the northern part of Finland into Murmansk, there are always economical support programs so they could take journalists with them. And like Anastasia mentioned, this fantastic network of the Barents Press, that is a totally informal network. It's not a registered foundation or an organization or something, but a totally informal network that assists journalists on each side of the border. So that when I have a colleague or someone from Tromsø or a smaller place in northern Norway that want to go and see what their people are doing in Murmansk, I know that, okay, if there is a local journalist there, I can call Anastasia, and she will probably help to facilitate to get the right people to do interviews with or others in Murmansk, and vice versa. And I don't know how many hundreds of Russian journalists that have been over here in Northern Norway on such kind of support programs. And report very good, objective back to their media, whether it's radio or TV or internet or whatever.
Can there be? Yeah. I don't know. The internet's kind of slow here. We'll collect them as they come in, though. But can there be too much overlap? Like, is there a risk that there's so much collaboration that there stops being a separate identity and it just becomes a blend of the same? Is there a risk of that in cross-border cooperation?
Not at all. It's just to look at the media in northwest Russia today and compare it with the media in northern Norway. I think there is a bigger difference. The distance between our way of reporting today in November 2014 compared with just half a year ago. The media situation in Russia has changed tremendously, to my mind. But I'm sure Anastasia could explain more about that. You're sitting there every day and you're a part of the Russian journalist teams. But we are further away from each other today than we were some few months or a few years ago, I think.
Well, it's quite difficult for me to judge about that because I work in the regional level. We both work in the regional level, and I try not to be influenced by the huge policy and everything that is done in Moscow or in Oslo. I think there is absolutely different stories, and I try to be a journalist in the region. And I remember one example. You were asking about Lenin and so on. When young journalists started to come to Norway, for example, from Russia, it was the first time for them. They were so charmed, fascinated about everything that happens here, how it looks here, that the stories written by them in Russian media were so sweet. We couldn't get the real picture, objective picture of Norway, and that was a problem. And the head of Barents Press Network once announced, and it was a joke, but she announced there is a competition who would, among Russian journalists, please write a critical article about Norway, and you will be awarded with a prize. Nobody wrote. There was no articles about that. So that is probably one feature of that, the relations. But I know that there are quite professional journalists on both sides in Norway and in Russia who try to be objective. But sometimes I can give you another example. Just now, it's very popular theme what we are writing about Norway is barnevern. And I think it's very popular because it's that is about common people. And there are many stories about Russian families who live in Norway, and they say that they bring up children in an ordinary way, they're polite and they love their children. But suddenly comes the evil, that is a barnevern, and takes their sweet children from the families. And I think that this word barnevern is exactly the word we can frighten our children with. That's really, and there is a huge streaming in our media when Russian journalists they're writing such articles, and Norway is a devil now. And I think that the next step will be that Barnevern is frying Russian children. The headlines, I imagine those headlines. That is about cultural differences, and I'm not sure that we'll be able to listen to each other. That is very important in our situation. Not only to listen, but to hear each other. But sometimes we don't want to. We imagine very good headlines, and the headline is a powerful weapon, and we don't want to think about something else. That is a problem. That what concerns cultural differences.
Okay. I think that a bit of separation will stay here, definitely. For example, when I look at my region, I'm from the relatively small country in the Central Europe. We have something like Visegrad 4, it's Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Czech Republic. We basically have all our problems also in media, who are sometimes pretty the same. 25 years after the fall of communism, the media are playing some role, but they are still operating in the societies where institutions are quite weak. Sometimes even civil society is not so strong, so we have, and sometimes also media is almost existential problem. Sometimes we don't know if the money flowing in media, whose money are there. So, for example, now in Slovakia or also in Hungary, there is a lot of talks about how Russians are spreading money in media in Central Europe, trying to influence the narrative. So we have our own problems, but also our own solutions. Also in such a small region as Central Europe is. So I think the cooperation will be there. I have many good friends on Czech Republic, Poland, Hungary, and as I said, we have sometimes very similar problems, and we can get together maybe to solve them. We can have a very good cooperation, but also of course for other reasons. As I said, our solutions might be a bit different. So the separation is sometimes it's like this in relations. Sometimes you need a 2 weeks break to look at the situation, and maybe I still like the girl or maybe not. So yeah, it's I think it might be something like a bit of danger that with cooperation. Everything could be the same, but I simply, especially in the world of journalism, I simply cannot imagine we will be the same. I think that everybody wanna write and wanna tell their own story. So I think that the cooperation is great, and it will continue. I think this was a great example, as you told us about the network, that you can do something from Bulgaria, and you have so many great people around. They can help you. So this is the positive things about the world of new technologies, that you can get together with people. But again, sometimes it is also a problem. We are working, for example, you're working as a regional journalist, but the big things also, and as Thomas mentioned a few times, right now the relations between West and East, or however we call it, are simply not good, sometimes even very bad, and it influences also our work. And in some countries, where the media freedom is really very low, being a journalist, I mean real journalist, not somebody who is reprinting press releases, means being an activist by definition. Sometimes we don't like journalists, don't like to to be called activists, and sometimes it's even not right being an activist, a journalist. But simply in some countries, if you are a real journalist, you are an activist. And so I think that if something is going on any level, from local to state, I think that's, and I don't want to play a hero, but I think that's up to journalists to simply speak up.
I kindly suggest to look at the wall and to respect the public's wishes and to reply these questions.
Yeah, I was going to jump in and say, obviously a very well-known border crisis right now that is also an identity crisis and a collision of East and West is Ukraine. And I think, as journalists, it's been a hard one to sort of grapple with, because there are lots of different sides. There's lots of propaganda, and it's hard to get a clear read on the situation. So how can media help with the cross-border relations in this situation, and really what is our role there?
Да, нельзя оставить этот вопрос без ответа.
So we cannot leave this question without an answer.
Безусловно, роль медиа в конфликте между Россией и Украиной настолько интересна, неожиданна и нова, что об этом можно было бы говорить много, но это не тема нашей сегодняшней дискуссии.
Of course, the role of media in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia is so interesting and so new that we can talk for hours about it, but this is not the subject of our today's discussion.
Но все-таки несколько слов я скажу.
But I will still say a few words.
Когда тут присутствуют мои коллеги, мои соотечественники, я думаю, что когда в школе они учили поэзию большевистского поэта Маяковского и слышали фразу «Я хочу, чтоб штыку приравняли перо».
Okay, so I have my compatriots here in the audience, and I believe that we all remember when we studied the Bolshevik poet Mayakovsky, when he wrote about his wish that the writing pen could be equalized to a bayonet.
Я думаю, что никто из нас даже вообразить не мог, что вот эта фраза реализуется так буквально, и мы станем свидетелями.
So I don't think anyone of us could ever imagine that this phrase could turn into reality and could be implemented such literally.
Никто из нас не был к этому готов.
And no one of us was prepared for this.
И этот феномен, думаю, нам еще предстоит изучать и думать о том, чтобы наш горький опыт передавать другим, с тем, чтобы никто не стал больше жертвой такой серьезной информационной войны.
So, and I believe we will still have to study this phenomenon, and we will need to share our bitter experiences to make sure that no one else becomes a victim of this serious information war.
К сожалению, российские журналисты принимают участие в этом конфликте как дистанционно, так и непосредственно.
So unfortunately, the Russian journalists are participating in this conflict both remotely, from the distance, and also on site.
Практически участвуя в боевых действиях, в допросах пленных.
Practically participating in the hostilities and the interrogations of the prisoners of war.
И даже в касках с надписью «Пресса» иногда стреляют в украинских граждан.
And even sometimes shoot at Ukrainian nationals wearing helmets with press written on them.
У меня много друзей журналистов в России.
I have a lot of journalist friends in Russia.
Никогда не стану обобщать.
And I will never generalize.
Никогда не стану считать всех врагами,
and I will never consider everyone an enemy.
но думаю, что эта ситуация – это очень важная причина подумать о безумной ответственности всех журналистов.
But I believe that this situation is a very important reason to talk about or to think about the huge responsibility of all journalists.
О том, что медиа имеют огромный миротворческий потенциал.
To think about the huge peacekeeping potential of the media.
И в то же время могут быть убийственным оружием.
But on the other hand, that can also be a lethal weapon.
Подумать о том, сколько людей могут стать жертвами манипуляций.
And to think about how many people could become victims of manipulation.
Именно поэтому я думаю, что вот такие журналисты, как Анастасия, которые на региональном уровне делают все, чтобы не возникало вражды, чтобы было доверие, чтобы была объективная информация, я думаю, это надежда на то, что все-таки когда-нибудь все будет хорошо, и журналисты будут выполнять свою миссию честно и ответственно.
So, but there is still hope that the journalists will perform their mission in an honest and responsible way, and I believe people like Anastasia who are focusing on making their work in the region, in reporting the news and making sure that there is no hostility. So I think that there is a hope for that in the future.
I will not dive deeper into the Ukrainian crisis, but I would like to underline that from a regional point of view, we are not only talking about using the media in there's one question here on the screen as a military branch of Kremlin in Ukraine anymore. This is something we see also up here in the north. There was a story posted by Vesti. Pierre Canal, I think it was broadcasted on Sunday. It was at least appeared on the web portal of Vesti on Monday morning, where a reporter had a 7-minute program from a submarine just outside the coast here, between Murmansk and Kirkenes. It's a submarine called Yuri Dolgoruki. It's the newest ballistic missile submarines of Russia. And the reporter, he was standing on the bridge of the submarine and telling his viewers that, well, from this very fantastic new brand submarine, we can hit any targets, any place on the earth, so nobody should be safe. And I mean, there the journalist is actually the one taking the position as the one threatening the rest of the world by using nuclear weapons. And that's happening in just outside here, out in the Barents Sea. And that has nothing to do with the Ukrainian crisis, but it tells a bit about how Kremlin is using their TV. I will not use the word branch of a military structure, but at least way within the borders of what we could call professional propagandism. It reminds me about those movies I remember when I was a very small child, seeing from the United States about their propaganda on nuclear weapons and the evil in the East, etc. So we should be very, very much aware about the development of how media and journalism is a kind of cover for other states' kind of way of handling global politics and so on. In the Barents Observer, we had a huge discussion that Monday morning this week. Should we write about this? Should we report about that there is another journalist that is actually stepping into the stage of propagandism? We decided not to do so, but at least here, the audience here should be aware that this is something that is not only down in Ukraine, but it's absolutely here in the Barents region as well.
You know, Thomas, when you are not lucky with a doctor, you won't accuse all the doctors around you that they're not so good professionals. The same thing is with the journalists. Of course, there are some funny things. For example, when journalists from Moscow come to Murmansk and they really come to another country I think that there are two countries, Moscow and, for example, Murmansk region, and they know nothing about the region, and they write very funny things. We are laughing, and they're not professionals. Why should we discuss them? But I think that the problem especially for young journalists, why I'm talking so much about young journalists, is that the face of journalism in my region, in the Murmansk region, is very young, and I don't know why. Probably people are under over 30, 35, 40. They are disappointed sometimes in the profession, and they don't want to work. And it's easier for them to write press releases, and it's probably not so much responsibility in this business. I don't know, but the problem for them is to find this border between patriotism, to be a patriot, and a propagandist. And this border is not visual, it's not obvious for professionals as well, I think. You need intuition, professional intuition, some moral qualities to understand, and a very big, huge experience to understand it. And of course you can make mistakes, or sometimes you understand it, sometimes you don't realize that you are used as a weapon, as you mentioned, and as an instrument of some forces and some powers. But I absolutely agree with you that the question of responsibility is one of the most important for the journalists, both in the capitals and in the regions. It's the same.
I don't want to get into some fight, but who in Russia today can advise that they is used as a weapon? Only somebody who is lobotomized. That's my opinion. So I don't think so, but okay, we can discuss it for a long time, I think. It might be also about not being professional, but what's going on from Russia. I think it is a clear flow of propaganda through various channels, especially on the global level. So I also wouldn't call it, as Thomas said, a military branch, but definitely it is a part of the strategy or part of the tactics. We also can discuss if Mr. Putin has a strategy or he only has some tactical moves. But this is a real problem also for journalists who are trying to get another sources, how to get them from Russia. So it influence. At this moment, I'm working more on the foreign policy. So at this moment, it simply influence basically everything.
Great. Okay. Well, we're going to wrap up the Ukraine discussion, and we can come back to it later. But I want to pivot to another very controversial border that's gotten a lot of coverage this summer, Gaza-Israel. So we're going to flick on the film that's been brought to us from Gaza. It's a quick one, and then we're going to have a quick break afterwards for 10-15 minutes, and we'll come back with a chat with the director of the film.